right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we will now get into talking about the Colts and them picking up a win over the Steelers. The Steelers suffering their first loss of the year, so we'll get into that. But I did want to bring up that earlier in this game, Anthony Richardson did leave with an injury, a hip injury. He's dealing with a hip pointer, and he's been evaluated during this week, and he's viewed as day-to-day at the moment. So that's, I guess the best case scenario because, of course, last year he got hurt with the shoulder injury, and then he was out pretty much the whole year. Really didn't get to see him play. And this is the problem with him, though, is, running with the football, can he be able to protect himself? And, we're fortunate that it doesn't seem like this is going to be a long-term injury. But again, this is kind of a repeat of last year, And, the Colts did get the win. Got to give him credit, once again to Mr. Joe Flacco. But, yeah, you don't want to see your franchise quarterback continue to get hurt and not be able to protect himself. And that happened in this game as well. But you know what? It is a part of his game. You're not going to completely take that away. But you got to find a way where he can, minimize the hits. And again, it's kind of hard because, look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen's, similar play style. He's going to barrel over people. But the Colts got to figure something out there because you don't want him to really get hurt and then he's out for an extended period of time. So we'll see if he ends up playing, but I did want to bring that up. So let's kind of go through the game summary. So I was a little surprised by the Steelers' defense because the Steelers' defense did not play well in this game. Even when Anthony Richardson, was doing good before he got hurt. But even when Joe Flacco came in, they just still couldn't get anything going. The Steelers' defense, they couldn't stop anything. I did want to acknowledge before we get into it, Anthony Manzano in the chat, a show regular. He said, how much realistically can the Raiders get for Davante Adams? He hasn't been performing that well the past couple of seasons. Well, I said it before. I blame it on the quarterback play. Davante Adams I still think is a very good receiver, and I think in the right situation, he will be back to producing like how he did in Green Bay and with Derek Carr. So, and he also said that's the issue with these purely running quarterbacks that can't throw. They don't last that long in the NFL. Well, I think Anthony Richardson does have arm talent. You see some of the throws that he makes, it's very impressive. It's kind of a mental thing with him because, some of the turnovers look bad, like against the Bears. Like he'll throw that nice pass down the field to set the Colts up, and then he'll throw that bad red zone interception. I think Anthony Richardson has a ton of arm talent. But the difference between Josh and Anthony is Josh is 235, and Anthony, and I'm being generous, is maybe 215 to 225. Okay, that is also a good point. But like I said, they got to figure out how to work around this because you don't want to take that away from Anthony Richardson and make him a pure pocket passer because running with the football is part of his game. But they got to figure something out. But anyways, let's kind of go through it. So first play of the game, Anthony Richardson connected with Michael Pittman for 32 yards. Then Jonathan Taylor, who also got hurt in this game, had a 14-yard run. And Jonathan Taylor from 2 yards out scores a touchdown to make it 7-0 Colts. Steelers punted. Colts, again, scored a touchdown. Anthony Richardson connected with Michael Pittman for 28 yards. There was a fumble in this game, or on this drive. It was when Richardson took off with the football, a gain of 14, and he got hurt on that play. And Flacco came in, and actually Anthony Richardson came back into the game, but then he was taken out again. Flacco then connected with Josh Downs for a 4-yard touchdown to make it 14-0. Steelers turned it over on downs, and then the Colts, another scoring drive. Matt Gay from 33 yards out kicked the field goal to make it 17-0. So 17-0 after the first quarter. Steelers punted, Colts punted. Then there was a fumble, and it was George Pickens. It was a completion for 10 yards. Actually, the Steelers were driving, but Pickens ended up fumbling, and the Colts got it back, but Colts didn't do anything with the ball. They ended up punting. Chris Boswell then on the Steelers' next drive kicked a 50-yard field goal. So the Steelers were down 2 scores at the half. More punts to open up the third quarter. The Steelers fumbled again, sack fumble of Justin Fields, but then the Colts ended up missing the field goal. Then the Steelers, big play to George Pickens for 38 yards, and that set up a Justin Fields rushing touchdown. He had a couple on the day, so that made it 17-10. But then the Colts answered. They scored a touchdown. Joe Flacco connected with Ogletree for a 15-yard touchdown, so that made it 24-10. Then the Steelers answered with another touchdown drive, another Justin Fields rushing touchdown, so that made it 24-17. Colts kicked a field goal. Steelers, another touchdown drive, a 37-yard completion from Fields to George Pickens, and then later in the drive from the Colts 8, Justin Fields connected with Pat Freiermuth for an 8-yard touchdown, and that was basically it. The Steelers, unfortunately, got the ball back towards the end of the game, but on 4th and 11, Fields tried to connect with Van Jefferson, and that ended up being incomplete. They turned it over on downs, and the Colts ended up winning. And Joe Flacco on the day. I mean, how about Joe Flacco? You know, do the Browns miss him? I think the Browns miss him. And I was actually watching a video of Mike Florio and him talking about how, you know, the Browns maybe didn't want to bring back Flacco because fans will be begging for them to start him. And I do understand that. But this is what Flacco ended up doing in relief of Anthony Richardson. 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, was efficient. He went 16-26. Like I said, Jonathan Taylor actually got hurt in this game. So it's possible he could end up missing this week when they take on the Jaguars. Colts aren't considering injured reserve for Jonathan Taylor as I'm looking here. It's an ankle injury. But yeah, it's a high ankle sprain. So he could be out for a little bit. And that's a big loss. Jonathan Taylor was off to a good start. And Trey Sermon would be taking over as the lead back. Just, again, more injuries. That is literally the worst part of this game is injuries. You know, and there's been a ton of them so far. But yeah, so they could be without Jonathan Taylor. Trey Sermon would take over. But yeah, I mean, how about Joe Flacco? I mean, you know, the Browns, they let him go. The Colts end up signing him. And, you know, he comes in against a team that he knows very well. And Ben Roethlisberger was actually in attendance of this game. And, you know, Flacco was talking to him before the game. You know, those guys went at it a bunch of times. And, you know, he's still, I mean, obviously this Steelers team is a lot different than, you know, the teams that Flacco used to go against. But Mike Tomlin is still on that sideline. I mean, you still got Cam Hayward, T.J.Watt, you know, was on the Steelers when Flacco was still a member of the Ravens. But yeah, it's a different Steelers team. And you know, Flacco did what he was supposed to do. And he is one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And you see the situations that he gets put in. You know, with the Colts, with the Browns last year. And then you look at what happened with the Jets. He was not good. I mean, I know he had that miracle win against the Browns, you know, a couple of years ago. But, you know, the Jets, he was not good. And that's an indictment on the Jets. You see all these quarterbacks that have been on the team, and they go somewhere else, and look at how they produce. The Jets have a problem. But we're not talking about them. We're talking about the Colts. And, you know, this is a big win for them. You know, get themselves back to 500 after a rough couple of games in a row. Well, they started off 0-2. I mean, Anthony Richardson played well in that game, but they lost to the Texans and then, you know, lost to the Packers and Malik Willis. Again, wasn't a pretty game against the Bears, but they got the win. And then this, you know, Anthony Richardson from the start played well. I mean, the Steelers' defense is not going to play well every single week, but I definitely was a little bit surprised that, you know, of how flat they ended up playing here. But it happens, and that's not going to happen every single week. And Anthony in the chat says, can you explain to me why it seems the NFL has been suffering from these injuries as a lack of practices during the season? I mean, I think part of it is definitely conditioning, but it's a violent game. It's a violent game. I mean, how many times do you see a lineman or a running back, their leg gets rolled up on, and they end up suffering a high ankle sprain or, you know, a significant knee injury? I don't think it should. Well, I will say there's been a handful of hamstring injuries that you can maybe point to. If it's non-contact, you could point to that as conditioning. But when you got guys that are suffering high ankle sprains, it's not, because of conditioning. It's because their leg gets caught underneath another player. So it's a combination of both. It's a violent game, but yeah, I mean, conditioning I think is also part of it, depending on what the injury is. And then, okay, so let's go back to the statistics for the game. So Justin Fields, again, played well. 22 of 34, 312 yards, 1 touchdown, no interception, was sacked 4 times. Steelers are a little banged up on the offensive line. That's, a problem going forward. Justin Fields was the leading rusher. 55 yards rushing for 2 touchdowns. There was no Jaylen Warren in this game. Cordero Patterson had 43 yards on the ground. Najee Harris, 13 carries for only 19 yards. Steelers got to get this running game going. It can't all just be on Fields. George Pickens, another quality game. 7 receptions for 113 yards. Pat Freiermuth had 5 for 57. Najee Harris, 3 for 54. Well, Freiermuth also had a touchdown. Fields had a couple of fumbles, only lost one. Pickens had a fumble loss in this game. Only 2 sacks in the game for the Steelers. None by T.J.Watt, which was a little surprising. And then you see Joe Flacco. I have his stats here. Anthony Richardson, before he went out, got out of the game with the injury. He went 3 for 4 for 71 yards. Jonathan Taylor, 21 carries, 88 yards, and a touchdown. Leading receiver was Michael Pittman. Colts got to get him going. 6 receptions for 113 yards. Josh Downs had 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. And also Andrew Ogletree had 1 reception for 15 yards and a touchdown as well. And like I said, Colts defense had 4 sacks. So next week, the Colts, they take on the Jaguars in Jacksonville, a team that still cannot win a game. They're 0-4. And then for the Steelers, they take on the Cowboys, a huge game on Sunday Night Football at home. So we'll make sure to preview that game on Friday. But, I mean, I'm not really too concerned about the Steelers. I mean, I was actually encouraged by, Justin Fields. So if he could play like that and the defense can, get back to how it was, the first 3 weeks, Steelers are going to be in good shape. But you could also point to the fact that the Colts defense hasn't been very good. But, they did get 4 sacks, a couple of turnovers, so that's encouraging for them going forward. But even their record of 2-2, Steelers are 3-1. So before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys once again, tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit the super chat button in the chat. This will help create a super chat of any thought or comment you may want to see me acknowledge during the live broadcast. Just makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, when we come back from our second break of the show, we will talk about the Bengals picking up their first win of the season against the Panthers, 34-24. We'll get into the specifics of it when we come back. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.